In a way, it's nice to know there are Greek gods out there because you have somebody to blame when things go wrong. For today's video, I'll be reading The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan for the first time. This is the first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, and it follows a young boy and gods. Beyond that, I really have no idea what the story might hold. A lot of my friends really love it, and I do know that worldwide it's also really well loved, and so I just wanted to document my thoughts as I read it. Today I have more free time than usual, and so I'm gonna go make myself a cup of coffee and get started. As a 23-year-old, I'm well aware of the fact that I'm not the target audience for this book, but regardless, I'm 2 chapters in, and so far, I'm really enjoying it. I'm hooked. I think the book opening was really strong, and honestly, it just made me want to continue reading. And other than that, I've already found characters that I really like, one of which is Percy. So far, we know that he's been repeatedly kicked out of school, and he has ADHD and dyslexia. I really like his relationships with Grover and Bruner. I like the fact that he repeatedly tries to protect his friends since he is a target of bullying because of his disability. And I also like that Grover is also protecting Percy, although I'm not entirely sure, or it hasn't been revealed why that's the case or why he has to protect him. Also with Mr. Bruner, I just think it's really wholesome how he's rooting for Percy. Again, we're not entirely sure why, but it's always nice when a teacher is rooting for a student, which is why when Mr. Bruner was telling Percy that Yancey Academy wasn't the right place for him, it really touched me how sad it made Percy. Because essentially Mr. Bruner said, "This isn't the right place for you. It was only a matter of time." And Percy reacted, "My eyes stung. Here was my favorite teacher in front of the class telling me I couldn't handle it. After saying he believed in me all year, now he was telling me I was destined to get kicked out." Which I could only imagine how that must have felt, like someone that you felt like was rooting for you, all of a sudden sort of telling you that he expected you to fail. Even though I'm sure that he had his reasons, it just didn't come out right. Also, in the second chapter, I don't know much about Greek gods, but I do know that he met the Moirae. One is in charge of giving the people the thread of life, and then one sort of allocates or measures out this thread, and then the last one cuts it, which is death. And he saw a thread being cut, which I assume was his thread of life. And so I guess he's gonna die. I don't know, but I'm excited to read on. Something that I really like are the chapter names. I just find them funny. Also, the book itself, there's a lot of pretty funny moments. For example, I tried to wrap my mind around what was happening, but I couldn't do it. I knew this wasn't a dream. I had no imagination. I could never dream up something this weird. Young man, names are powerful things. You don't just go around using them for no reason. I feel like it's a running theme in a lot of books for names to hold a lot of meaning, and I've just always found that really interesting because when I think of names, honestly, I just think that they're necessary but arbitrary. But what are your thoughts on names and the power of names in this reality or in the reality that we experience? I just feel like if a name isn't attached to a being, then it's just a sound. So I've done my morning Anki cards, and before I start doing practice questions and reviewing them, I'm going to take a short reading break. But I wanted to give an update on how the story is going. So currently I'm a little over 100 pages in, and I'm still really enjoying it. The majority of the books I read are slow-paced, and this is a really fast-paced book. But I'm surprised that I really like how quick everything is. Perhaps I just needed a break from all the slow-paced books that I'm reading. In regards to what has happened, honestly, a lot has happened. Currently, he's in Camp Half-Blood. This is a camp filled with other demigods just like him. Percy essentially has the ability to control water, so his father might have been Poseidon. I'm not sure if Zeus can control water, but I don't think so. I guess I'll find out. Other than that, we've also gotten introduced to some more characters, such as Luke and Annabeth. Those are the ones that I'm really interested in finding out more about, especially Luke, just because I have a feeling he's going to be the antagonist. There's like a correlation between scars and villains for some reason, which when I think about it can perpetuate a really harmful idea of correlating certain disfigurements to the amount of goodness in people's heart, but it's a prevalent feature of stories nonetheless. Aside from that, I still really like Percy. I think he has a lot of really admirable qualities, especially how caring he is in regards to his friends, or should I say friend, Grover. I really like how much he cares for him. And I quite like Grover as well, and I hope nothing bad happens to him. I also liked Percy's relationship with his mom. Even though we didn't get to see that much of it, I just quite liked how much he loved his mother, and how much his mother in turn also cared and loved for him. Sally was a really interesting character, and I'm curious to see further interactions between them. So I've realized that I've been saying Groover's name wrong. So I don't think it's Grover, it's Groover, which is sad because he's like my favorite character. But I just wanted to come back with another reading update. I didn't get to read as much as I would have liked yesterday just because I just had too much to study. But I still managed to get to page 150, and now Percy is going on a quest to retrieve Zeus's lightning bolt. So he met with the Oracle, and it told him some interesting things. One of which was, you shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend, which I really hope is not Groover. I don't know, I feel like it's Luke, but I don't think they're actually friends, so I think Percy just looks up to him. And also, you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. Percy values most his relationships, especially that with his mother and Groover, so I think he'll have to choose between a person and something else. It could be his mother, bringing back his mother from the Underworld, and his friends. Regardless, I think it would be a really difficult decision for him to make. The parts of the book that I also really like are the magical elements, such as the pen that like turns into a sword, and also this idea of mist. So Sharon here explains what mist is to Percy, and he says, "Yes, read the Iliad. It's full of references to the stuff. Whenever divine or monstrous elements mix with the mortal world, they generate mist, which obscures the vision of humans. You will see things just as they are, being a half-blood, but humans will interpret things quite differently. Remarkable, really, the lengths to which humans will go to fit things into their vision of reality." Which, I quite like that. I think it is also true in the real world. Confirmation bias is a very real thing. The fact that human beings have a tendency to seek out and acknowledge information that fits with their beliefs and their perspective and kind of ignore the rest. So I just thought that was a cool thing to add to the story. Also, like I've mentioned before, I'm not familiar with Greek mythology, or I have a very surface level understanding of it. I do have the mythology book, and I kind of looked through it just to get an idea of some of the significant works, or what we base our understanding of Greek mythology off of. And it mentions it was the poets Homer and Hesiod who imposed order upon the myriad gods and beliefs inherited from earlier times. Because Homer's epic poems were set in an aristocratic and feudal society, which preceded the birth of democracy in Athens in the 5th century BCE, his gods behaved like chieftains, motivated solely by their own desires, which I think is also reflected with the way that the three big gods are acting so far. The fact that Zeus and Poseidon are kind of arguing, and even Percy says, because he has a dream and he kind of sees Zeus and Poseidon arguing, and Zeus essentially saying, "Give him back." And Percy was struck by how childish Zeus sounds. And so that is a really interesting aspect of Greek mythology. The fact that Greek gods are childish almost, or very emotionally driven, which is something that typically you don't associate with gods. This has definitely piqued my interest in potentially reading the Iliad and Odyssey. I know my dad has told me to read them. I do really want to, but I feel like my foundation in regards to Greek mythology is just not good. So maybe this is a nice introduction. I just wanted to say that if you want a book with really nice illustrations and explanations, I really recommend these. They're really fun to flip through. The psychology book is definitely my favorite, but all of them are really good. So I'm reading this part where Percy is talking to Groover, and he's explaining why Sally married Gabe. And essentially Groover says that it's because his stepfather smells so repulsively human. And I don't know, I just found that really funny. And it reminded me of Perfume by Patrick Suskind, because the main character, he has no scent, and so people are put off by him because he doesn't smell human. But when he explains, and this isn't a spoiler by the way, but when the main character is explaining how humans smell, it's like a really vile mixture of poop and sewer and rotten eggs. And that sentence just reminded me of this book, which is a really good book, by the way. If you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend it. So I did some more reading, and now I'm a little over 200 pages, and I really like the trio that went on the quest, Groover, Annabeth, and Percy. I quite like them. I think their interactions are really cute, and the dialogue between them is really fun to read. Also, I like that we've got to see more of Groover and Annabeth, their backstory and sort of what drives them. So they're more than just side characters now. They actually have depth. Especially Groover. I think he's still my favorite character. But the reason he really wanted to accompany Percy on a quest is for the chance to get the searcher's license in order for him to find Pan, the god of nature. And that reminded me of a poem which I really recommend. It's called Pan With Us by Robert Frost. And it's written from the perspective of Pan, the god of nature. And the theme is humanity's move away from nature towards industrialization. With a lot of Robert Frost poems, he kind of just writes them and then it's left up to the reader to interpret what they mean. Rather than guide the reader towards a certain understanding of his work, he kind of just presents it and he's like, here it is. And the reader just takes from it what they can, which I think is really cool, but I digress. I wanted to read 2 stanzas, but I do highly recommend that you read it. He tossed his pipes too hard to teach a new world song far out of reach, for a sylvan sign that the blue jays screech and the whimper of hawks beside the sun were music enough for him, for one. Times were changed from what they were, such pipes kept less of power to stir the fruited bough of the juniper, and the fragile bluets clustered there, than the merest aimless breath of air. They were pipes of pagan mirth, and the world had found new terms of worth. Other than that, they have encountered Medusa and also beheaded her. And I wanted to read more about Medusa, and there is like a spread in the mythology book on her. So she was beheaded by Perseus, who was the son of Zeus and Danae. I also found it interesting how in some myths, Medusa was born as a monster. Then in other myths, she was cursed by Athena for her vanity. And also that Athena cursed her with mortality, which is something that her 2 sisters did not have, and so she could therefore be killed. It also seems to me that unless you seek her out, she doesn't kind of just go around turning people into stone. But then again, I have a really limited understanding, but I do want to read more about that. Like, did Medusa have an incentive to go out and turn as many people into stone? Or like, did people just come and stumble upon her? Is she inherently evil, or did she have the misfortune of being born with this power that she can't help? So I'm now over 300 pages in. I'm in the last portion of the book, but I wanted to mention 2 passages of the book that have prompted me to read or reread one of my favorite poems. In this part of the book, they've gone to the Underworld, and Annabeth is essentially explaining the subdivisions, and she mentions how most people, well, they just lived. Nothing special, good or bad. So they go to the asphodel fields. And again, there was a part where Percy thinks, so few people did good in their lives, it was depressing. I just found those parts really interesting, just because I do agree, I don't think the majority of people are evil or really good. I think they kind of just exist. I'm not sure that it's a bad thing, but that is the case nonetheless. The poem that I'm referring to is The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot, which I highly recommend if you haven't read it before. But essentially, it's about these hollow men who are men who have died, but they've done nothing worthwhile with their lives. They weren't really for or against anything. They, again, just existed. I think the interesting thing about this poem is that for the majority of it, the hollow men, they speak collectively. And so it gives you a sense of a loss of individuality. And again, one of the stanzas I really like is, those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom, remember us, if at all, not as lost violent souls, but only as the hollow men, the stuffed men. But yeah, those passages in the book, they reminded me of that poem. So I finished reading The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and I just wanted to give my closing thoughts. I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was the perfect read for me this past week just because it was so lighthearted and so fast-paced. It was just so easy to get immersed really quickly in the book, and so it was a nice break between tasks. And I definitely want to see where the story goes. As far as specific parts that I liked, I did really like the characters, especially the trio of Annabeth, Groover, and Percy. I quite liked all of them, and Groover is still my favorite. I don't know, I just really like him. But even Annabeth I quite liked. The book has definitely also piqued my interest in regards to Greek mythology and stories revolving around Greek mythology. I do want to explore books under that topic more. Out of the big gods, I think Hades and Poseidon, I would really like to see more of them. In conclusion, I really enjoyed the book, and I'm really glad that I read it. In the future, I do want to read the other books in the series. I hope this video was somewhat enjoyable, but thank you for watching.